has said that he and people who worked for him have absolute immunity from testifying before Congress. And don't forget, there are other subpoenas that are out there as well. There's one to Mick Mulvaney. There is one to Charles Kupperman, who is the former deputy director of the National Security Council. There could be one for John Bolton.
Fox's John Roberts reports the Justice Department will appeal that ruling. The Supreme Court has temporarily blocked another congressional subpoena, this one for the president's tax records.
The justices have directed the president to file the formal appeal on the merits by noon December 5th. If they elect not to take the case, the stay issued Monday will expire and the records must be turned over. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi calls the decision disappointing, but expressed confidence in the court affirming what she calls Congress's oversight authority. If the high court decides to hear the case, the stay will remain in effect until the justices issue a decision, which would likely be in mid-2020.
Fox's Sean Lanchel in Washington. The president gets the last word in the case of Eddie Gallagher. The Navy had threatened to kick him out of the SEALs over his conviction for posing for a picture next to a dead ISIS fighter. The president ordered them not to. Now the Navy reports it has canceled the peer review board, and Gallagher will retire this weekend. More trade talks by phone between the U.S. and China on Monday on a Phase 1 trade deal. China's Commerce Ministry says there is consensus on some issues, but the foreign minister has warned the U.S. ambassador to China that a Hong Kong-related human rights bill, which the president is expected to sign, could damage the trade talks. Monday Night Football, the Ravens rout the Rams 45-6. Baltimore now 9-2 on the season. America is listening to Fox News.
Water. It covers nearly 3/4 of our Earth. From vast oceans to millions of rivers and streams, we're all concerned with protecting our world's water. But none is more important than the water you and your family drink and use throughout your home. A Connecticut water treatment system can improve your water so that your family is using the best water in the world. Connecticut, for refreshing ideas on water.
American Water Tech. A passion for improving lives through better water.
'Tis the season to be feasting. Indulge the fun way at Sandalo Club's Donut Dash 2K 5K on Saturday, November 30 at Teasen Complex. Race starts at 6 a.m. There will be cash prizes, and the first 300 finishers get a free coffee mug, perfect for dunking those donuts you will get when you register. The more donuts you eat, the better you'll do. The Donut Dash registration fee is $15. Register online at guamdonutdash.eventbrite.com or call 488-9028. A portion of the proceeds will benefit the Guam Police Department.
Sentencing Monday for Yujing Zhang, the Chinese businesswoman caught at the president's Mar-a-Lago estate last spring with a bag full of suspicious electronic gear.
33-year-old Yujing Zhang first claimed she was there to use the pool, even though she had no swimming suit with her. Then, once she got through the second layer of security, a Mar-a-Lago staffer ran her name and discovered Zhang was not supposed to be there, and the event she claimed to be there for had been canceled. And because of what she had on her, well, that triggered all kinds of speculation that perhaps she was either a Chinese spy or an unwitting dupe of the Chinese intelligence services. In her bag, she had 4 cell phones, 1 laptop, 1 external hard drive, and 1 thumb drive with, according to the government, malware in it.
Fox's Phil Keating reports Zhang has been sentenced to 8 months in jail, but she's already served most of that and will be ticketed for deportation. A Florida man's been charged with trying to get the Islamic State to target 2 college deans for terrorist attacks. 23-year-old Salman Rashid arrested Monday. The FBI began investigating him back in April following some violent social media posts. He apparently wanted the deans at Miami-Dade College and Broward College targeted. He'd either been suspended or expelled from both of those schools. In Utah, police are investigating what may be a cold case murder in more ways than one.
Police in Utah are investigating how a man's body wound up in a freezer inside the home of a woman who had died. Tooele police say they discovered the man's body while responding to a welfare check of a 75-year-old woman who hadn't been seen for several weeks and found her dead. Investigators suspect foul play in the unidentified man's death, but don't know if the woman had been involved before she died. Police say the body had been in the freezer for at least a year and could have been there for up to 11 years when he was last seen by neighbors. Rich Dennison, Fox News.
And I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Knowing that we have choices in medical providers locally and outside of Guam is important and reassuring. This is the reason why Calvo Select Care provides quality health care options to its members. From a wide array of local, primary, and specialty doctors and clinics to a comprehensive hospital network on island and outside of Guam, you can trust Cabo Select Care to be there for you. Federal employees and annuitants enroll today. Call 477-9808 for more information.
Here at The Point, we're thankful for a lot of things.
Our awesome sponsors,
an island brimming full of people with pride and passion,
and a perfect place to do business.
but when we reflect on it,
we're most thankful to have you listening.
And this seemed like a good time to let you know. We hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving.
and thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Mescla. Try their featured special for November. Canadian pizza, house-made pizza dough topped with marinara sauce, 3-cheese blend, Canadian bacon, Spanish chorizo, peppers, onions, and cilantro pesto. Available in Agagna and in Tumon at the Grand Plaza Hotel. For reservations, please call 969-2652.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Yeah. Something new, right? Something you never heard before on Tall Tales. A emotional reading of the Second Amendment by the ever-popular host of Tall Tales who's been back on island now, back on the air, for 2 days. I have a Second Amendment article that I want to read today. Daryl told me that while I was gone, James Howard, a member of Triple J, who was the other 2 J's in Triple J? I can't remember.
Yeah, I forget too.
Yeah. Well, James Howard was one of them. And James Howard asked the question, apparently, does the Patriot Act infringe upon the Second Amendment? And I'm going to say that the answer to that is no, at least not directly. And I have an article here from the Second Amendment Foundation. And it says the Second Amendment Foundation, as civil rights organizations, we are very concerned about sections of the Patriot Act that allow invasions of privacy under the guise of some investigations that may be nothing more than a legal fishing expedition, said SAF founder Alan M. Gottlieb. Well, first thing I've got to stop here and kvetch a little bit about this use of the word privacy. You would think that the quote, right to privacy is in black letter, in dark letters in the Constitution. It's not. You do a word search on the United States Constitution, you won't find the word privacy anywhere in there at all. Only liberal justices of the United States Supreme Court could find it when they determined that it is to be found in the penumbra of the other amendments in the Bill of Rights. And they use that to declare a birth control law unconstitutional, basically laying the foundation for Henry being able to marry Herman. That also sounds in a right of privacy. So they don't make any points with me when they start talking in terms of invasions of privacy. However, as civil rights organizations, we're very concerned about sections of the Patriot Act that allow invasions of privacy under the guise of some investigation that may be nothing more than a legal fishing expedition. A search conducted without the knowledge or consent of a citizen, including so-called sneak and peek search, is an anathema to the foundations of our legal system. Sections of the Patriot Act allow the use of so-called delayed notification search warrants that let police search homes and businesses and remove property, including firearms, before telling the owners. Well, let's take a peek at the Fourth Amendment and see exactly what it says. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, homes, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. So when it says, when the Fourth Amendment says the right of the people to be secure in their houses, that suggests to me that it wouldn't be correct to have some law enforcement type sneak into my house when I'm over here doing tall tales, sneak into my house and conduct a search and maybe take some articles that are mentioned in this earth warrant out of my house. As it stands, Gottlieb continued, the Patriot Act also permits the government to seize certain personal records from third parties, whether they are doctors, attorneys, or even the neighborhood librarian. Doctors and lawyers, that's not so bad, you know. Lawyers got to expect that kind of thing, right? And doctors have really no standing to object to such thing, given how they probe with various kinds of instruments their patients' bodies. But librarians, now that's going a little bit too far. Yeah. And they could not even tell you about it. So they could do this. They could under the Patriot Act, feds can get your records from third parties and not even tell you that they've done it. As it stands, as you were, whatever happened to the concept of attorney-client privilege or doctor-patient privacy or whispering in the library? I wonder if those guys who go in there to get the records from librarians obey proper library protocol, which means you're really supposed to keep your voice down. Right, Real Joe Cruz?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Many people are concerned that such authority might threaten our Fourth Amendment rights, because another section of the Patriot Act also could ultimately be abused to stifle protest by various organizations. There are definitely First Amendment issues that could be addressed. While these issues do not directly relate to the right of individual citizens under the Second Amendment to keep and bear arms, he observed, a threat to any civil rights is a threat to all of them. And that's kind of the reason that, one of the reasons that we start out with the Second Amendment. Even if I were not in favor of the Second Amendment, I think that it's important to support it, because a threat to one of the freedoms in our Bill of Rights is a threat to all of them. I made that point more than once. While there can be little doubt that the authors of the Patriot Act had the best of intentions, I don't go along with that either. Sometimes it's true that good intentions are the stuff from which the road to hell has been paved. The road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think it's important, Gottlieb concluded, to recall the words of Benjamin Franklin, who said, "They who give up essential liberty to obtain a little temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety." So, James Howard, I hope that answers or goes somewhere in the direction of answering the question you raised with Daryl the other day. If not, let me know, and we'll come back to it. Okay, then we go to Jemmy Ikotny. Zemi and Caught Me is that portion of the program where we take a look at the editorials of the two daily newspapers. Check them out for proper use of the language, grammar, factual accuracy, conceptual viability, etc. And having done so, I take my coveted blue pencil here and give the blue star to the better of the two editorials, if there is one that's better than the other. And as usual, today, surprise, surprise, today the Daily News ran an editorial from USA Today. Yeah. That hardly ever happens except on odd number and even number weekdays. That's about the only time it happens.
Only weekdays that end with Y?
Right. And this is from Michael O'Hanlon, special to USA Today. That's an interesting name, O'Hanlon. Do you know why I think that's an interesting name, Real Joe Cruz?
I'm not sure, sir.
Have you ever heard of a young lady named Virginia O'Hanlon?
No, I haven't.
Yeah, well, have you ever heard the expression, yes, Virginia, there is a Santa Claus?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, well, that's Virginia O'Hanlon.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and you read the editorial page on Sunday. if they can somehow manage to do it, they'll run the editorial where Virginia wrote to one of the newspapers, I think it was the New York Post, and said, "My friends say that there's no Santa Claus." And my dad says, if you read it in the Post, you know it's true. So I'm asking you, is there really a Santa Claus? And it's a very interesting answer that you won't want to miss, Real Joe Cruz.
I see.
And I'll probably bring it in here on the next program after Christmas. So the Daily News runs Trump-bashing editorials almost on a daily basis. Today, they actually gave Trump a little credit for something in a really backhanded way. And here's what Michael O'Hanlon says. He says it's called Trump's one good instinct. So of all of his instincts, one of them is really good. And it's kind of like, Trump is not such a bad guy. He didn't beat his wife on Saturday. So here is he starts out, to be sure, Donald Trump continues to get many things wrong in regards to U.S. relations with Ukraine. According to recent reporting by the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post, he still thinks that Ukrainian officials tried to help Hillary Clinton defeat him in 2018. And there's more of that. And there's more of the same thing in the rest of the column. And here is the one good instinct that Trump had. All of this is unseemly and reckless, as even many critics of Congress impeachment investigations would agree. So I guess the worst thing that you could have happen to you is not having the USA Today attack you. Even worse is to have the USA Today editorial writers defend you. And here's his one good instinct. There is one element of Trump's thinking that should not be associated with the falsehoods he perpetrates, because it usefully challenges what has become a stalemated American policy towards Ukraine. According to Jeffrey Toobin in The New Yorker, President Trump realizes that attempting to seek to bring Ukraine into the Western orbit through NATO membership has been counterproductive. And that's the one good instinct he has. All the rest of the column, and it's a full page. It's over 2 pages long. All the rest of it is telling us what a skunk Trump is, what a dirty skunk, an honorary pig stealer he is. And they slip in that one line. Talk about damning him with faint praise. Then we have the Daily News editor, as you were. Then we have the Post editorial. Good call on hiring at DOC. GPD should also take priority. After Governor Lujan Guerrero's meeting with nearly 36 Department of Corrections officers, the island's prison has had two major developments. DOC Director Samantha, and she's not the director of the Department of Corrections, she is the Director of Corrections. I wish the papers would get this right. I'm going to get it right. Director of Corrections Samantha Brennan has resigned, and the leadership over the operations at the prison has been given to Police Captain Joe Carbolito. The resignation of Brennan and assignment of Carbolito to take the lead on operational functions at DOC took place last week. On Monday, the governor's office announced the expedited hiring of 40 to 60 DOC personnel. Later next year, the government plans to hire an additional 100 DOC staff. The expedited hiring followed concerns raised by DOC officers in their recent meeting with the governor. The DOC officers have said the shortage of prison guards has put their safety as well as that of the community at risk and have taken the toll on their morale because of increased bureaucracy and long shifts. And then the editorial goes on to talk about GPD ought to do the same thing. Interestingly enough, the editorial does not mention the name doesn't mention that there was a change in leadership at the Department of Corrections. So apparently the editorial was written before the announcement of the change of leadership at the Department of Corrections. So if you haven't had a chance to read the paper or watch KOM last night, Frank Ishizaki is the new Director of Corrections. Frank was the Director of Corrections back in the Calvo administration and did a fairly credible job. I don't recall any scandals arising under his leadership. He's got a pretty good pedigree. He's been chief of police. He was an FBI special agent, etc. So I think maybe we found out with Samantha Brennan the fact that a person is of the, can I say this, Real Joe Cruz, is of the female gender?
I think you can.
Yeah. It doesn't guarantee that she will be able to do a good job as Director of Corrections.
True.
Although that was certainly the feeling after the election. Hey, we got 10 women in the legislature. Hey, we've got a female governor, right? Hey, we got a female chief justice, as though that's all it takes. So Samantha Brennan turned out to be not so hot as Director of Corrections. So now we got Frank Ishizaki coming back for an instant replay of his earlier time as Director of Corrections. So I'll try my best to keep you informed as to what's going on there. I will just rattle on a little bit about the Director of Corrections. Being the Director of Corrections is a little bit like being the king of a small country. You have almost absolute authority over your subjects, and you are responsible for everything in your subject's life. You're not only responsible for their custody, safety, and security, you're also responsible for their medical, their dental, their haircuts, their clothing, housing, obviously, everything. So it's quite a job. When Nelson's bill came on to require 10 years of law enforcement and corrections experience for the Director of Corrections, I didn't think that was a good idea. I didn't feel strongly enough about it to go down and testify. And I suppose if I had, people would have said, well, yeah, you are the classic example, Bob. But I think what we need at the Department of Corrections, first of all, has got to be somebody that's honest, someone who's got a pretty good brain housing group. It's not a job. Well, let me put it this way. You know how long it takes for an average person to become a good director of corrections, real Joe Cruz?
No, I don't, sir.
Yeah, it can never happen. An average person will never be able to be a good director of corrections.
I see.
Yeah. So there's that concept, there's that idea, and then it has to be someone who has an understanding of all of the different aspects of corrections, the medical, the dental. Doesn't have to be a doctor. The guy doesn't have to be a dentist, but he has to have some understanding of these things. So I'm not so sure that promoting up through the ranks is a good idea as far as corrections is concerned. Corrections is different from police. The chief of police is actually a cop. He has all of the law enforcement powers of a cop. Some chiefs of police actually wear a cop's uniform, etc. The director of corrections is a civilian. He's not a corrections officer. He doesn't go through corrections training, etc. So it is a tough job, no question about it. And it's a job that is underestimated. My kind of snotty comment used to be that when it came time for political payoffs back in the day, you could imagine a governor saying to one of his confidants, let's send him to corrections. Those people out there don't vote anyhow, so he can't hurt us that bad. Send him out there, get him on the payroll. But if you stop to think about it, yeah, Frank was director during Camacho's term, not during Calvo's term. My bad. Forgot. You stop to think about it, being a corrections officer, in a lot of respects, is harder than being a cop. Because if you're a cop, let's say you're on patrol where the action is, 1st platoon, Saturday night, Central. That's where all the action is. During that time, maybe you'll run into 1 or 2 people with criminal tendencies you may have to deal with. When you go to the Department of Corrections, everybody you deal with has criminal tendencies. And the folks in the Department of Corrections, the inmates, are very good at scheming and planning to put things over on the prison administration. That's one of the major pastimes of inmates. So it's a tough job, and I don't think we perhaps show as much appreciation for corrections officers as we should. I hope Frank Ishizaki will pick up on that. So today, I'm going to give the coveted Blue Star not to the Daily News, because Michael O'Hanlon, because the Daily News finally found a way to say something good about Trump, but to the Post. Pretty good editorial. Okay, now we go to the card, and this is what I've got on the card. I've got the international radio listening audience versus Tall Tales. I've got San Augustine Barnes and Pito Terlahi versus Michael San Nicolas and Rule 6 of the legislature's standing rules. I've got UOG versus Marler. And I've got Anonymous versus Tall Tales. It's a pretty slim card, and it's amazing. You know, I come back and there just aren't that many red-hot issues popping up this week. Maybe we're too close to Thanksgiving. But it was. I don't have a very full card. I may have to, if I get through the card and there's still time left in the program, I may have to go to my default list. But anyhow, starting out with international radio listening audience versus Tall Tales, second opportunity for those who raised issues during my absence in the context of saying, wow, I wish Bob were here so he could talk about this. So I've got a limerick. I should have read this yesterday. I got a limerick from the poet laureate of Tall Tales, and this is what he said. Excuse me. This is what they said. For so many weeks, we've heard the shrieks and complaints of the unruly mob. The problems abound, and he cannot be found. Where, oh, where is our Bob? So now we may rest, for I can surely attest, a certain tall person is back. The scoundrels will cower. Bob's back in the tower, and corruption he'll surely attack. The poet laureate of Tall Tales. Okay, so I picked up on the Patriot Act versus the Second Amendment, and if you have anything else that surfaced during the time that I was gone that you'd like me to pick up on, you could call or Facebook it, and I'll see what I can do with it. We're already at that first break, so let's take a short break here.
Hulu is all your TV in one place, plus more. Watch thousands of hit shows, movies, and award-winning Hulu originals for only $5.99 per month. It's TV without the cable contract and the freedom of on-demand streaming. Get current network shows from ABC, CBS, NBC, and Fox, and binge watch every season of your favorite cable shows. Premium Hulu viewing is brought to you by Proline Automotive and AB Sports, Guam's store for Nike. To advertise on Hulu, call Choice Digital at 989-0042.
Every Tuesday, KFC has got 20 pieces wings for just $15 at all KFCs on Guam.
Are you ready for some football? The Ray Gibson Show has got your fix every day with the Points NFL Pick'em contest. Get the latest updates as we check out the past week's performance and break down the upcoming action. Get your game on by calling the hotline at 888-TALK or sound off on Facebook Live at thepoint.gu. League members get a chance to win some awesome weekly prizes with a shot for your choice of a new GTA phone. The NFL Pick'em contest is brought to you by Current Guam with special thanks to GTA.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Welcome back to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, Guam's single voice of reason. Call now, 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Okay, well, I don't see anyone who has a burning issue that came up during my absence that they would like to surface. So I'll go on to San Augustine Barnes and Pito Turlahi versus Michael San Nicolas and Rule 6. And this is what I promised you yesterday. I've got Bill 246 here, and we'll spend some time on this. It's unfortunate that it shows some of the shortcomings of our legislature. Let's start out with Rule 6 of the Standing Rules. I'll read it again. No bill introduced, considered, or passed by the legislature, any of its members, shall contain more than one subject matter and shall not contain unrelated subjects or pertain to multiple projects except for one annual budget bill, etc. So, you know, a bill is only supposed to contain one subject, and there are a lot of good reasons for this. People who go to public hearings usually want to testify in favor of a bill or against a bill. If this germaneness rule is not complied with, then a person finds himself in a position of favoring some of it and not favoring other parts of it. The ability to debate is seriously impacted by violations of this rule. And most importantly, a clever packer could pack something that's really essential into a bill and use and rely on people's voting for that really essential part to sneak other things through that could never stand on their own. And I submit that Bill 246 may fall into that category. So let's spend a few minutes here going through it. I'm just going to give you a couple of quick and dirties here. Section 28 of the bill. The bill is 17 pages long, and this is Section 28. This act shall become effective immediately upon enactment. Whenever you see those words in a bill, you know the bill was drafted by an amateur, because Title I of the Guam Code tells you that a bill becomes effective on midnight on the day it's signed by the governor, or the veto is overridden, or the 10 days runs. So to say that the act is effective upon enactment is silly. It's a waste of words, and it tells you that the draftsman really didn't know what he was doing. The obligatory severability clause is just about as bad. So we've got the legislative findings. The legislature finds, legislature further finds that the Election Commission is Guam's autonomous agency tasked with executing Guam's elections with the authority to proffer recommendations to clarify, strengthen, or enforce laws. Well, it's not an autonomous agency, not right now, but if this bill passed, it would be an autonomous agency, and I'll show you why that would not be a good thing. So we start out Section 1, Section 2 of the bill. Oh, and by the way, the news story that ran yesterday, Pito Terlahi said that he worked with the students at the university and the Election Commission to come up with this bill. Well, the Election Commission, yeah, I can kind of see that. The people at the Election Commission work with the existing law and may be aware of some of its shortcomings. To expect the University of Guam student to have that kind of knowledge, I think, is really wishful thinking. Even a lawyer wouldn't, on the top of his head, have a good handle on election law unless he spent some time boning up on it. I don't think University of Guam students spend much time boning up on the election law. So Section 1 defines political signs to mean billboards, posters, banners, or display which advocate for or against a candidate for political office or any matter to be presented to the electorate for vote. So the statute before said advocate for. It didn't say for or against. So I suppose that's a worthwhile addition to the code, but that would have made a good bill. It regulates signs. It doesn't regulate elections. It regulates signs. So if it regulates signs and it occurs in the chapter of, or in the title of the Guam Code that deals with land management, it should have probably gone to the committee that has jurisdiction over the Department of Public Works, because the Department of Public Works is supposed to enforce these laws. So that would have made a decent bill. Section 3 deals with the election of members. Caution again, I'm still fighting this cough, so when you hear me cough, I'll try not to cough into the microphone, but if I accidentally do, don't hold that speaker too close to your nose. So this one deals with election to the school board, and it removes an entire section dealing with nominating petitions for election to the board, candidates' names, etc. And it removes that entire section and renumbers the following section. Well, that might have been a good bill too. So now we're up to 2 possible bills. This deals with elections and not with the board, not with education. So it wouldn't be assigned to the Committee on Education, but it could be a separate bill. So now we've got 2 bills on the same piece of paper. Section 4, electors may be registered in accordance with this section from time to time. This section of the law amends the Motor Vehicle Code. So you're wondering, well, why would there be an amendment to the Motor Vehicle Code? And what Pito Terlahi says is, from time to time, we need to review the law. And the answer is, this is our so-called motor voter law, so that you can register to vote at the time you get your driver's license. But it really doesn't have anything to do with the Election Commission. Yeah, so this could be another bill. So we're up to 3 different bills now. Then the next bill deals with mayors. And it says that a person, in order to be a mayor, has to live in the municipality for which he wants to become mayor for 3 years preceding the date of the election. Not 1 year, but 3 years. Now, yeah, that deals with candidacy, but it's in Title V, the General Government Operations title. So this one deals not with elections, but with mayors. So shouldn't this bill, we're up to 4 bills now, shouldn't this one be referred to the committee that deals with mayors? And then we've got Section 6, adding a new holiday to the government of Guam, making Election Day a holiday. And you can imagine that I'm absolutely not in favor of this. We have too many holidays already. We've already got, let's see, we've already got 12 holidays. And when we figure how much it cost us to close the government down, it's over $1 million according to the Director of Administration. The law currently in place says that every employer, government or private, is to give an employee 2 hours to vote on Election Day. So making Election Day a holiday, well, that's really nice for government employees, because that means, hey, all right, we get another day off with pay. All right. Yeah, I'm going to go over to the polls, get there early, chow down, hang around my candidate's tent. That's a lot of fun. Yeah, okay. Way to go, Joe San Augustine, giving us an extra day off. Yeah, right on, Tina. Hey, Pito, good job. But there's always that nasty question that arises. A nasty question is, yeah, but who's going to pay for it? And the people that who's going to pay for it's going to be you and me, the taxpayer. Now, the fact that Election Day is a government of Guam holiday doesn't mean that any business is going to have to close. So this is just another way of pandering to government employees. And once again, it's the kind of thing that people might want to come down and testify on. Well, if you got 17 pages of this stuff, and let's see, how many sections? 28 sections. You got about 26 different bills encompassed here. A person might say, this is going to take forever, because there will be so many people coming down to testify on one part or another. The only part I really care about is this BS extra holiday. But I don't have time to go down and sit at the legislature for 4 hours to get a chance to speak my mind. Okay, then we've got 117, which is kind of It says that each district of Guam shall constitute a voting district. Not very dynamic. And then the next section says, case of a candidate or nominee, the word name shall mean the name that appears. Okay, now they're politically incorrect here. The bill says, in the case of a candidate or nominee, the word name shall mean the name that appears on his/her. Yeah, I know. What should the bill say, Real Joe Cruz?
They?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Shall mean the name that appears on their birth certificate, passport, certificate of naturalization, court-ordered name change, certificate of marriage, or any identification meeting the Real ID Act requirements issued by a state. Anywhere in this title the word name appears, this definition shall apply. So, I guess, does that mean then that we have to stop, if this bill passes, do we have to stop calling you the Real Joe Cruz?
I'm not sure.
Probably.
Probably.
Yeah. So, again, I understand what's going on here. This may be a little controversial. Remember a few years ago, somebody who was listed as Romeo Carlos was the center of a controversy as to how a person's name should be listed. And then, over time we've had the custom of putting the non familia beside the candidate's name. I didn't do that. I should have said Robert Klitzkie, R. Familian Loca, tall.
I see.
Yeah, but I didn't do that.
How come you didn't choose Beto? You should have used the name Beto, kind of has a ring to it.
Yeah, that was, but back in those days, Robert, what's his name? Robert O'Rourke? Yeah, wasn't Spanish. So we didn't know about the name Beto then. So again, I can understand the logic here, and this would make a very good bill. So we're up to about 7 different bills now. And then now we're getting into the really interesting stuff. This is a repeal and reenacted Section 2110. Now, the way the mechanics of bills work is that you start out with the existing law. And if you're going to amend existing law, the parts that you're removing from the law, you strike out. And the parts that you're adding to existing law, you underline. So you underline it, and you see it's added in. Strike through means it's coming out. Now, there's another way of changing existing law, and that's to repeal and reenact. To repeal and reenact means that the statute is taken completely out of the books and a new statute is written in. Now, the legislature last time around had a rule that even in a repeal and reenact, the new matter had to be underlined. I don't know if that's still a rule or not, but Section 9 here, adding a new Section 2110 to Title 3, does not follow that convention. So in order to know what that section really does, you have to go to the law that's on the books now. I hope I have it here somewhere. Yeah, alas, I don't. Yeah, I printed it up and I just forgot to bring it along. But the current law just says that the Election Commission shall submit annual budgets for its operations. Here's the new law here's what would be in place if this bill became law. The Guam Election Commission shall have full authority in their ability to conduct the business of elections on Guam and shall exercise this authority as if a fully autonomous entity. Remember when I was going through the legislative findings, I said it's not autonomous now, but if the bill passed, it would be. I see this as really sneaky. The Guam Election Commission shall have the authority to establish the fiscal and personnel requirements in order to efficiently and effectively conduct elections on Guam. GEC's annual budget submission shall include a detailed breakdown of the funding level necessary to meet all statutory requirements for elections and personnel, and shall abide by policies and procedures set forth in its rules and regulations. So what we're dealing with here is we're dealing with the creation of a new empire called the Election Commission. So I'm going to come back to this after the short break, and then we're going to move into our big halftime show.
Lights, camera, fajitas! Taste the sizzle at Chili's with our new fajita flavors, featuring the new all-star cast, the grilled stuffed avocado with southwestern shrimp topped with Santa Fe sauce, cilantro, limes, and queso fresco. Or the Monterey chicken, juicy chicken breast topped with barbecue sauce, mixed cheese, bacon, diced tomatoes, and chopped green onion. All served on a sizzling skillet with warm flour tortillas. Experience bold, sizzling fajita limited time flavors only at Chili's. More life happens here. Located at the Tumon Sands Plaza, 2nd floor.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Life happens. You need to go to work. The kids need to go to school. There are family events, friend events, any event, and everyone needs to communicate. When you need mobile services that you know you can rely on, choose GTA. As the winner of Ookla's 2019 award for Best Mobile Coverage on Guam, you can rely on us to offer you better plans to modernize your life, fit your needs, and keep you connected. So visit us today and let us help you connect. GTA, we start with you.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
So here we are back again, and I looked up 3 GCA 2110 that would be repealed and reenacted by this bill. The law right now says GEC's annual budget submission for election years shall include a detailed breakdown of the funding level necessary to meet all statutory requirements and abide by all policies and procedures set forth in its rules and regulations, just like any other non-autonomous agency in the government. But under the new law, the Guam Election Commission shall have full authority in their ability to conduct business and shall exercise this authority as if a fully autonomous agency. Then okay, if we're going to do it, guess what? That would be an appropriate subject for a separate bill. It's a pretty big item. And then we've got the next section, subsection, as you were section 10, the Guam Election Commission Revolving Fund. And this creates a fund that I labeled a slush fund that all of the fees and fines that the Election Commission collects go into and can be spent on operations of the fund. So there you have it. You know, instead of an agency that depends on the government, on the appropriation process for its budget, therefore the number of its employees, etc., we now have an autonomous agency that has a slush fund. And I'll go into it specifically, but you know, another thing that this bill does is significantly raise the fees to apply, you know, in order to become a candidate, $1,000 to run for governor. So again, this section dealing with the revolving fund, make a fine bill all by itself. Section 12, electors may register electronically in accordance with this section from the time registration is open until 45 days prior to an election. That's a new section. Next one deals with times of registration. So these two, 12 and 13, and maybe even 14 could be included in a single bill. 14 says that the registration of electors shall be in progress at all times at the main office during such hours as the office is open for business until the closing of the registration rolls. Electors may also be registered at such times and places within Guam as the commission shall deem advisable and convenient from the time of registration is open until 21 days prior to an election. So you got to, now if you're going to register, you got to do it 21, if this became law, you'd have to do it 21 days before the election, not 10 days. Again, that's a change in the law. It could be a standalone bill. Next one goes with the qualifications of registration clerks. Next section, eligibility and unsuccessful candidates. This is the anti-Frank Uggan, Paul Calvo section of the law. It says no person shall be eligible for candidacy, inclusive as a write-in candidate, under any party at a general election, if that person was a candidate for nomination and was defeated for nomination. Well, the way our ballots are structured, the only way a write-in candidate his name could be marked off would be either in the Republican column or in the Democrat column. So too clever by half. Section 17, and once again, that's an important standalone section, could be a bill. Section 17, filing of candidacy nominations and fees. And here's the new fee schedule. Remember, the fees that are paid go into the revolving fund under the control of the Election Commission. Governor and lieutenant governor is $1,000. Senator, $500. Now, I suppose people are going to say, well, you know, you want to run for senator and you can't even come up with $500. I suspect that there have been candidates who weren't able to come up with the $500. And the populist elements of our community are going to come forward and say, yeah, politics is only a rich man's game. The average guy who's working for wages is not going to have an extra $500 to pony up to run for senator. So we're going to be stuck with the same old manakilo in the legislature time after time. Delegate to Congress, $1,000. Mayor, $500. Vice Mayor, $300. Attorney General, $500. Public Auditor, $500. CCU, $500. Board of Ed, $100. So all the and again, this has the possibility of being quite controversial, and it would make a fine standalone bill. It shouldn't be included in this omnibus bill here that Terlahi and St. Augustine and Barnes have put together. The next section says that a candidate has to get a clearance from the District Court of Guam. First of all, I don't think the Election Commission, well, I'm going to come back to this after that big halftime show we have every day, marching bands, drill teams, etc. So let's take a short break for the halftime show, and then I'll come back and finish this up. And let's see, what else have I got on the card here? UOG versus Marler and Anonymous versus Tall Tales.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
He'll have to appear. I'm Jack Callahan, Fox News. A federal judge in Washington has ruled former White House counsel Don McGahn must comply with a congressional subpoena. The House Judiciary Committee months ago called McGahn to testify about White House reaction to the special counsel investigation into Russian election meddling. The Trump administration sought to block his testimony, claiming executive privilege. But now the judge has ruled that if McGahn wants to assert that privilege, he'll need to appear before Congress and do it himself, possibly on a question-by-question basis.
This ruling sets up an interesting situation for those who work and worked in the White House and the top tiers of the Trump administration, as President Trump spoke to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. White House Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney, Energy Secretary Rick Perry, and former National Security Advisor John Bolton have all decided not to testify, but that could change based on this judge's ruling.
Fox's David Spunt reports the Justice Department says it will appeal the judge's ruling. New York Congressman Jerry Nadler, who chairs the House Judiciary Committee, issuing a statement saying he now expects McGahn will make an appearance before his committee. The Supreme Court has temporarily blocked enforcement of a congressional subpoena for the president's tax records, directing the administration to file by late next week a brief on the merits of their argument that Congress lacks legislative purpose to examine the president's personal finances. The president says he's sticking up for the armed forces in his decision to restore the rank of Navy SEAL Eddie Gallagher.
You have a system where these warriors get put in jail for 25 years. I'm going to stick for our warrior. I will stick up for the warriors.
The Navy announcing late Monday that it is dropping plans for a review board to consider if Gallagher should be removed from the SEALs. He now plans to retire this weekend with his trident intact. America is listening to Fox News.
Rain. It's nature's way of cleansing the earth. Yet by the time that rainwater makes its way to your home, it may not be exactly the same as nature created it. A Connecticut water treatment system can improve the quality of the water you and your family drink and use throughout your home, so you can be sure your water is clear, clean, and fresh, just as nature intended it to be. Connecticut, for refreshing ideas on water.
American Water Tech, a passion for improving lives through better water.
Did you know that home loan rates have plunged again? Would you like to take advantage of these lower rates to help lower your monthly payments? Refinancing doesn't have to be for another 30 years. It can be for 10, 15, or 20 years. It's up to you. Reduce your monthly payments. Pay off your loan earlier. At Bank Pacific, where we're open to closing your loan in a hurry.
Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Credit conditions apply.
Strong winter storm could drop up to a foot of snow in parts of Colorado and Wyoming, prompting the airlines to issue travel alerts, and the National Weather Service posting blizzard and winter storm warnings from the Rocky Mountains to the Great Lakes. In Utah, there were 200 separate automotive crashes reported on slickened roads on Monday. State Trooper Riley Riggs telling drivers,
definitely slow down. They should already be slowed down in this weather, but if they could slow down and just give us a lane, move over, give us some room, so there is some room for error in case they hit a patch of ice or something.
The storm expected to move into the plains Tuesday, bringing high winds, more snow to Minnesota, Wisconsin, and to upper Michigan. In the Mediterranean, an earthquake has shaken Albania. The U.S. Geological Survey pegs it at 6.4 magnitude with a follow-on 5.4 aftershock a few hours later. Several buildings are reported to have collapsed. At least 4 people have been killed and scores more people have been hurt in Albania. Voters in Hong Kong standing up for pro-democracy demonstrators at the ballot box.
The people of Hong Kong sending an emphatic message that they support the protesters, handing the pro-democracy movement a stunning 90% of district council seats. More than 70% of Hong Kong's 4 million registered voters turned out, up from just 47% for the same elections 4 years ago. That in itself leading some chastened pro-Beijing lawmakers to admit changes have to be made. Hong Kong's chief executive Carrie Lam says she will listen humbly to the people. But the truth is she has little choice but to listen most closely to her Communist Party masters in mainland China.
Fox's Jonathan Hunt. Also, faculty teams searching the Hong Kong Polytechnic University say they found no sign of any protesters remaining in 4 of the faculty's main buildings that had been under siege for more than 10 days after being taken over by pro-democracy demonstrators. I'm Jack Callahan. This is Fox News.
Hey, what's that?
A Subway Big Hot Pastrami?
My big hot pastrami?
No, my Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Get your own.
Get your own Subway Big Hot Pastrami. Tender, juicy beef on freshly baked sunflower crunch bread, topped with pickles and mustard. Finish off your meal with all new seasoned potato wedges, baked to perfection right in the restaurant. Both available for limited time only. Subway, make it what you want.
GRMC's cardiology department treats most complex heart problems. In our catheterization lab, cardiologists use imaging equipment to treat clogged arteries that can cause heart attacks or heart failure. We perform balloon angioplasty, stenting, and other life-saving cardiac procedures. If you suffer from a heart condition, have your provider refer you to GRMC's cardiology clinic at 645-5500. GRMC, where patients are partners.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
Halftime music is always so inspirational. I really get a kick out of it. I really appreciate the cannon fire in there, too. Kind of typical of Tall Tales, cannon fire, right? Well, during the show, I had a chance to gaze at the Facebook comments. Not very many of them today. This is not a really juicy topic, but I think it's an important topic because I see 3 senators trying to put one over on us here. And that's why I'm spending this amount of time on it. I see St. Augustine, Barnes, and Terlahi is trying to put one over on us. But I did notice a comment where Nate horned in and said, so if I run as an independent, I can skip the Republican and Democrat primaries and go straight to the general? No, unfortunately, you can't. It's practically impossible. That is, as a practical matter, it's impossible to run as an independent here. Because in order to be on the general election ballot as an independent for senator, you have to win a primary. You have to do the petitioning, etc., and you have to get at least 4%, an amount equal to 4% of the total votes cast. But in the primary election, then you can advance to the general as an independent. But, Nate, nobody's going to vote for you. Because if you are listed as an independent candidate for senator, that means that those who vote for you can't vote for anybody else in that primary election. Because it all goes by primary. So if someone voted for Nate for senator as an independent and then voted for Lulian Guerrero as governor in the Democrat primary, it would be a spoiled ballot and it wouldn't count. So it's impossible. I think even for the most meritorious candidate to have sufficient draw to draw people away from participation in any other part of the election just so that person could advance to the general. Now, there is a way that a ballot could be designed in the primary election that would allow someone to vote for an independent and then also cast other votes in either party. It could be done. That idea has never been advanced, and my suspicion is that both parties would fight it tooth and nail because it would make it too easy for an independent to challenge an incumbent. And that's what a lot of these laws are, protection for incumbents. Okay, so going back to this bill, there's another section that changes the requirement that there cannot be any campaign activities within 100 feet of the polling place to 50 feet. And I suspect some people might want to challenge that. And again, it would make a fine standalone bill. And we've got another one that deals with residents. And then another one that deals with write-in votes. And then a real kicker here. In addition to the code dealing with special election to fill a vacancy in the office of the delegate to the House of Representatives. So it says that the Election Commission shall call for a special election on a Saturday on or about 60 days after a vacancy is declared in the office of the delegate to the House of Representatives by the Speaker of the House. I see this as an attack on Mike San Nicolas. Obviously, we've gotten along without this section up until now, and this section of the law is basically a means for the three musketeers to say, San Nicolas is in trouble, so we've got to be able to fill that vacancy once he's kicked out of the House. And by the way, he's a dirty skunk and an honorary pig stealer. So, kind of sneaky. And once again, if this were going to be done, this is clearly a standalone bill. It has no relationship to any of the other parts of this bill at all. Then we've got another section on dispositions and time for filing nomination papers. Referenda. Section 26 deals with referenda. Each section of a referendum petition shall have a 1-inch column, etc. And then we've got Section 27 of the bill, same, majority required effective date. A referendum must be approved by 50% plus one of all voters going to the polls to vote in a special or general election at which the referendum was placed on the ballot. So ordinarily, you would think that the requirement would be that more than half the people voted for the referendum. Not the case here. It has to be more than half the people that go to the polls. So you take all of the ballots that were issued, some of which were spoiled and didn't count, you got to get 50% of all of those plus one. So it makes it harder for a referendum to pass. I think this is, once again, a protection for incumbents. And then here's another section of the bill Kitchen sink, GEC approval. No campaign headquarters shall have a kitchen sink unless approved by the Guam Election Commission. So there's everything in this bill, including the kitchen sink. What do you think of that, Real Joe Cruz?
That's fine with me, sir.
Yeah, I'm just kidding about the kitchen sink. But everything else is in there but the kitchen sink. So
You're right, sir.
This should be probably 20 different bills, and it's one bill, and it's sneaky. It tries to slide the anti-St. Nicholas bill through with the rest of the stuff, and the creation of the empire of the Election Commission is buried inside this bill. So it's going to be interesting to see if the legislature is going to obey its own rules here, its own rules concerning germaneness, when if this bill ever comes on for a public hearing or for discussion on the floor. Okay, the next thing I've got here is a front page story from the Daily News. Indicted professor retires. A University of Guam professor accused of rigging bids for federally funded research programs will continue his affiliation with UOG and publish more long-term research papers with the university paying some of the cost. I suppose that his research papers are going to be dealing with his research on violating federal law. No. Although the university in 2015 discovered Thomas Marler's alleged fraud and reported it to federal authorities, it did not terminate Marler, who was a professor of fruit science. Instead, it facilitated his September 2019 retirement and later signed a post-retirement agreement with Marler outlining plant research projects he will continue to work on while retired. It states Marler will continue to represent the university's Western Pacific Tropical Research Center. And there's more explanation of what Marler did. Let's see, his trial is scheduled for February 11 in the district court. About 2 months after Marler's indictment was unsealed, the UOG College of Natural and Applied Sciences Dean Lee Udin signed a post-retirement agreement with Marler, stating Marler will continue his field research, etc. And what was he accused of? Marler and another person, two companies, paid each other off in return for suppressing federally funded UOG projects and took steps to conceal the conspiracy. Documents state Marler would prepare bids on behalf of Lawrence's company, according to prosecutors. Marler was charged with wire fraud, money laundering, conspiracy to commit money laundering, and conspiracy to restrain trade. So the university took swift action here. They found out about this in 2015. Now they're going to let him retire and they give him another contract. So there's this horrible misunderstanding in the government of Guam that pending criminal charges are a job protection measure. If the UOG had the goods on him in 2015, they should have fired him in 2015. Now, I know that the smart money over there is saying, oh, he's innocent until proven guilty. Well, he's innocent of a criminal charge until proven guilty. But as far as his employment is concerned, no. If he is guilty of misfeasance, nonfeasance, or malfeasance, even if what he did is criminal, what they did is criminal, they can be fired on the spot. But we don't seem to understand that. We had the case of Ovita Nauta, who was working at the police department. She stole money from the police department. She attempted to pay it back with a check that bounced. She was indicted. The facts underlying the indictment would have been sufficient to fire her at the time, but for some reason she wasn't fired. She was then transferred to the Department of Corrections. When she was at the Department of Corrections, she signed a plea bargain admitting guilt and was sentenced. And no action, no disciplinary action whatsoever was taken against her. And the Director of Corrections, Tony LaMorena, well, she wasn't working here when it happened, and by the way, she's an exemplary employee. Well, how can you keep somebody on the payroll that steals money from the police department? Then we've got the case of two people at the Department of Public Health and Social Services who defecated with the programs that they were in charge of. And there are criminal charges pending against them that haven't been resolved. So they were fired right away, right? No. The director moved them to other jobs away from the programs that they had defecated on, moved them to another position and kept them on the job. So, oh yeah, and then there's Eller, the guy that is actually in prison now for some criminal sexual conduct. University kept him on the payroll over a year after it became aware of what he had done. So it seems, and then two more at the National Guard. Two guardsmen accused of, two guardsmen who work full-time for the Guard were accused of criminal sexual conduct, and the Guard spokesman, Major, I can't remember her name, said, well, they're innocent until proven guilty, so we're going to keep them on the job. So it looks like if you're really looking for job security, go out and get indicted. And during the pendency of that indictment, no one is going to fire you because you're innocent until proven guilty. Not. So what kind of an example are we setting here where we keep these, when we know that these people have committed disciplinary offenses and we don't take any action against them for these disciplinary offenses? And of course, we've got a 90-day rule. If the director knows, the day that the director knew that Ovi Nauta had stolen the money from the police department, that clock starts to run. Unless Nauta is charged with the crime, then she has a duty to notify her director that it happened. You get a second chance at the time of conviction. But if there's enough for an indictment, management ought to be put on notice to investigate that employee, and if the charges are correct, fire that employee. Otherwise, we're all sitting out here saying, kakistocracy, a good word, kakistocracy. We just aren't paying attention to what we're doing, and we're tolerating, if not encouraging, bad behavior. So that's the story on Thomas Marler. Next item on the card is Anonymous versus Tall Tales. So I have an anonymous letter here. No signature on the letter. Dear Bob, I am a loyal listener to Tall Tales. I really like your program, and I really like the way you handle it. However, we really like your program, and we really like the way you handle it. But we don't want to put our names on this letter because we're afraid that the other talk show hosts might retaliate against us. So we're in fear of our reputations. But we want you to know that that you're really superb at what you do. And I hope you appreciate that, we can't sign our names here because we're afraid of retaliation. But we just wanted you to know that. Si Dios masi, Bob. It's on adios. This is, you know, if so, I had to write this up and give it to the news, because the news media would run with this. You know, the news media has run with 3 anonymous letters, right? Complaining about the guard, complaining about corrections, and complaining about, what was the first one that came up? Yeah, it'll come to me in a minute. So if any one of those anonymous letters had one signature on the bottom of it, would the newspapers have paid, and TV stations, would they have paid any attention to it at all? If the letter to the governor concerning the director of corrections was signed by Abraham Smuckahukowitz, no one would have paid any attention to it, because the thinking would have been, well, that's just one disgruntled employee, that happens. But if it's an anonymous letter, wow, that's really news. So if you want to complain about your boss, whatever you do, don't be a whistleblower. Don't be upfront. Sit down and write out your letter, and then pretend that a lot of other people feel the same way you do. Get it to the media, and it will have great currency. The TV stations, even the governor will pay attention to it. It just doesn't seem right to me, and I blame the TV stations and the newspapers for doing that without any check as to the accuracy of the allegations or any of the other journalistic standards. Now, newspapers, real newspapers, big town newspapers, will run stories based on unnamed sources, but they have some pretty strict rules. They have to have 3 sources that collaborate the facts. They have to do an independent investigation, and they'll run these allegations without naming the person who made the allegations. But a reputable newspaper is not going to run, or a TV station is not going to run an anonymous letter complaining about the director of corrections or the adjutant general of the National Guard. Or what was the other one, Real Joe Cruz?
Agagi?
That's the National Guard. The first one. Yeah, anyhow. That's what I had on the card is anonymous versus tall tales. I don't think it's going to change, because the anonymous letters are, of course, quite sensational, and the media outlets can use those anonymous letters to fill news holes, and it's kind of interesting, you know, kind of sexy, but I think it's also kind of irresponsible when you come right down to it. And I don't carry any brief for the Adjutant General of the National Guard. I don't think she's done a good job at all. But even poor performers should not be subjected to that by the media. It's not the anonymous letter writer, because ordinarily no one would know about an anonymous letter unless the director published it herself. All right, so here I am back on the job, gone through the whole card, and I've run out of hot topics for today. And I'm not getting much help from Facebook other than Gus Chasongas, who says we don't need sneaky politicians in office. And he also says, do tell Bob. That way I know who to send the stupidity award to. Yeah, so kind of a quiet day here on Tall Tales. So way back when I first started the show, I came up with this paper. and I'll read it. It says, listen to the radio talkers, read the blogs and blog comments in papers, check out the conversations in the bars and coffee shops, and it soon becomes apparent that answers are often more abundant than questions concerning important issues of the day. One of the functions of Tall Tales will be to state the questions for the answers that many seem so sure of, and then respond to those questions. Here are some of the answers that will be dealt with in coming weeks, not necessarily in the order of their importance. So I've got 24 items here, and I'll read through them until I find something that maybe would be interesting. Item number 1, you can carry any gun anywhere at any time. Well, those who listen to Tall Tales know that that is not correct, right? So the proper question would be, what are the limitations on bearing arms on Guam? And then this next one is the real tool of demagogues. We are second-class citizens. You know, tomorrow's our second-class citizens. Yeah. And, of course, that's not true. There are second-class citizens here, and I've explained that. I'm actually a second-class citizen, or maybe a third-class citizen, and I'll explain why. Everyone who resides in the 50 states and has assets anywhere in the world, well, unless he has a good estate planner, leave an estate behind, and that estate will be subject to federal estate tax. If you live in the 50 states and you make gifts, probably to your family or your cousin or something like that, you have to pay a gift tax on gifts in excess of about $12,000. If you were born on Guam, that doesn't apply to you. If you were born on Guam, your estate would not be subject to federal estate tax on any of your assets located any in the world except the 50 states. Now, that's a pretty valuable estate planning tool, especially for folks, like me, where you have one spouse who was born on Guam and one spouse who wasn't born on Guam. So I suppose in that respect, I could start kvetching. I'm a second-class citizen. My heirs are going to have to pay a high estate tax. It's not fair, Real Joe Cruz. I hope my estate goes before a fair judge.
As the busy holiday season approaches, the last thing on your mind is to visit your medical provider. At American Medical Center, we put your health first. A preventative visit will ensure a healthy holiday season. Call 647-8262, and together we can address any concerns you may have and make certain all your medications are current. From our family to yours, happy holidays from American Medical Center, your partner in healthcare.
Every Tuesday, KFC has got a 20-piece wing deal for just $15. Get this wing deal at every location KFC on Guam.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
Things to realize, things to think about, things to be thankful for. I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, things that need to be said every once in a while.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point at GuamTraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts. Brought to you by Guahan Insurance Services and First Hawaiian Bank on 93.3 The Point.
Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie is brought to you by Bank Pacific, banking on the Pacific for 65 years.
And the old seventh inning stretch. Center field bleachers, Wrigley Field. Doesn't get any better than that. So I'm back to my list here. Second-class citizens. So in that respect, I would be a second-class citizen if I compared myself to someone who is a, what is it in the Northern Marianas? There's the term of art. A Northern Marianas person, someone who's either Carolinian or Chamorro in the right blood quantity. I would be able to own real property in fee simple. That is, I could own property outright. But because I'm not a resident of Northern Marianas descent, I can't own real property in Saipan. I could take a long-term lease, and that's the best I could do. So once again, I'm a second-class citizen right there. Yeah. And then we also found out that if I wanted to go down at the Election Commission and register in the political status committee in the political status commission so-called plebiscite, I wouldn't be able to because I'm not Chamorro. So, you know, again, I'm a second-class citizen. But actually, this is all a will-o'-the-wisp. A citizen is a citizen is a citizen. And it really, you come right down to it, there are some technicalities dealing with taxation. There always is. But there's nothing wrong with the citizenship of anyone who is a citizen here on the island. If you were born at Guam Memorial in 1949, you're still a citizen of the United States. If you would be protected by the voting rights laws of the United States. You'd be able to vote wherever you lived, and you'd be entitled to all of the benefits of citizenship. So the idea of a second-class citizenship is really more demagoguery than anything else. Now, I know the smart money over there is saying, yeah, but we can't vote for president, so we're second-class citizens. And that really has nothing to do with a person's citizenship. As I've explained before, in the United States, your civil rights are basically a matter of federal law. Your political rights are a matter of state law. So your political rights are a function of state citizenship. But nobody gets to vote for president of the United States. What you, in effect, are doing is voting for an elector. And every state has as many electors as it has congressmen and senators. In 1876, Colorado, the legislature decided how those electoral votes would be cast. It wasn't done in a popular election. So this whole idea of voting for president, the reason that people in territories aren't able to vote for president is because the Guam doesn't have any electors. It doesn't have senators and or any representatives. So it's not a matter of your citizenship. As far as citizenship and voting is concerned, here's an interesting one. The presidential election of 1924 was the first time in American history that no non-citizen voted. In 1920, the election of 1920, some non-citizens were able to vote. So there's never been that strong link between citizenship and voting. So when you hear somebody say, we're second-class citizens, this is someone who wants to deal with the matter on an emotional rather than a rational basis and to attempt to inflame those emotions. There should be term limits for senators. That's item number 3 on my list. Well, maybe there should, maybe there shouldn't be. The argument that says there shouldn't be is that in a democratic society, the people ought to be able to vote for whomever they want. If you, time after time, if you elect knuckleheads, you don't have to blame anyone but yourself. The other side of the story is that senators become so interested in protecting their, I'm talking about Guam senators, protecting their incumbency, that other considerations are pushed aside. The only thing they really care about is being reelected, and those who favor term limits would see this as a remedy. Well, even if we all agreed that that's the way it should be, we wouldn't be able to do it because the Organic Act regulates elections for senators here on Guam. And I kind of touched on this before when I was talking about the San Augustine bill. This idea of requiring police clearances, et cetera, for people who run for senator, I don't think it's organic, because the Organic Act says that you got to be 25, a citizen of the United States, no crimes of moral turpitude. That's it. We can't add anything to that list. We can't say 25, U.S. Senator, no crimes of moral turpitude, and must have a note from his mother. We can't add that in there, or a court clearance. So that would be the case with any of the Organic Act officers, offices created by the Organic Act, not offices permitted by the Organic Act. So that would be senator, governor, lieutenant governor. Next item on the list. The Fed stole Fenadam from us. This was pretty controversial a few years ago. And Attorney Howard Trapp, someone I hold in high esteem, made the argument that the Navy, the Fed, stole Fenadam from us at the time the Organic Act was signed. Because there's a provision in the Organic Act that says that all of the municipal properties of the Navy were to go to the government of Guam within 90 days after the execution of the Organic Act, unless the president accepted any of those properties from the transfer. So Trapp said, you know, they just kept Fenadam. They didn't give it to us. Well, the problem with that is that Fenadam wasn't built until 1951. So it wasn't one of those existing properties. It's the Navy built it, and they didn't have any responsibility to turn it over to us at all. Now, those are those who make the argument that, well, you know, the water doesn't belong to the Navy. The water belongs to the people of Guam. And I suppose there's some relevance to that argument. Of course, when you pay for water, you're really not paying, you pay your water bill, what you're paying is the cost of bringing that water to the surface and piping it to your house, not actually for the commodity value of the water, because a gallon of water is probably worth about a penny when you come right down to it. A gallon of water in your Jeep out in the middle of the desert is probably worth a lot more than a penny. But it's not the intrinsic value of the water that makes it valuable. So I suppose there's something to be said for that. I've only been down to Fenadam one time in my 56 years on the island. It's really a beautiful spot. And people are very, very quick. The environmental wackos here are very quick to use the P word. Pristine. Pristine limestone forests. Well, it's pretty hard to find anything that's very pristine on this island that isn't behind a military fence. And I just wonder what Fenadam would look like if it weren't surrounded by Naval Magazine. But in any case, the Navy didn't have a responsibility to give it to the government of Guam. Item 5, the job of the Civil Service Commission is to protect employees. I sometimes think that that's what the members of the Civil Service Commission, if we could read their minds, that's the mindset that they take off on. Well, I've got to make sure that I'm fair. You know, I got to be fair here to this employee because he's got a family and he's got a mortgage to pay, and he did some really horrible things on the job. But if I vote to terminate him, it's going to be really hard for him, and that just wouldn't be fair. But that's not the job of the Civil Service Commission. The job of the Civil Service Commission is to provide a tribunal that will do fact-finding and applications of law to, among other things, employee disciplinary matters. It's the appeal that an employee is able to take from a decision by his director to terminate, suspend, or demote him. Sometimes I think the Civil Service Commission, on balance, does a pretty good job. Sometimes I think they come up with some really off-the-wall stuff. The best example that I could think of would be the situation where the port discovered that a couple people had been hired who weren't qualified for the job. And this came before the Civil Service Commission in what they call their post-audit authority. So they have a mechanism where they can examine any personnel action and make sure that it was done in accordance with law. Well, those weren't done in accordance with law. So what should have happened? Civil Service Commission should have said, these appointments are void. You could give the employee a reasonable time, a couple hours to pack his stuff and leave the property, but these appointments are void. They didn't do that. They gave the port 90 days to come up with a manner of dealing with this situation. Well, the way the whole thing turned out, by the time it was over, the court had said that the port had not complied with the 60-day rule because they knew that the employee should have been fired when the Civil Service Commission made that ruling. So sometimes the Civil Service Commission is like something out of Alice in Wonderland. First the punishment, then the verdict. But its job is not to protect employees. Here's item number 6. Only Chamorros are going to vote on Guam's political status. Now, this was drawn up before the Davis case. It said that the vote on political status was unconstitutional in violation of the Voting Rights Act. But at the time, once again, the media did a terrible job of explaining this. I saw numerous, I even tried to correct it, numerous stories dealing with the vote to determine Guam's political status. Well, that wasn't it at all. That whole question is framed in terms of the desires of the Chamorro people. In other words, what would the Chamorro people want to see Guam become? Not a vote to say this is what we should become. So the papers and the TV stations repeatedly got it wrong, so it's not hard to understand why people got it wrong. But that was not the purpose of the plebiscite, to determine Guam's political status. It was to determine the wishes of the Chamorro people. Then, of course, the government tried to finesse it and say, well, it's really not the Chamorro people. It's the resident people who obtained their citizenship by virtue of the Organic Act and their descendants. They tried to turn it into a political status and not a race-based status, which does not square at all with the way everyone who was involved with it was talking when all of that legislation passed. This is to give the Chamorros a say about their own island. So we have a commission, it's called the Commission on Decolonization. It is not a commission on decolonization. It is a commission on Chamorro self-determination. And a lot of people, a lot of the media outlets would see that Chamorro self-determination is a synonym for decolonization. Not so. Right now, as far as colonization is concerned, I live in a colony. So perhaps I have some feeling about the decolonization of Guam because I live in a colony like everybody else who lives here. I'm not Chamorro, but I do live in a colony. So if you're talking decolonization, you have to do it for the island, for the political entity known as the island of Guam or the territory of Guam. Let's take a coughing break here.
Here at APL, our core values give the company its heart and soul. Whether it's connecting your business with our global network through our newly enhanced service or investing our efforts into giving back to the community, APL is committed to serving you. We humbly honor the opportunity to find innovative solutions for you and your business. To learn more about our enhanced service, call 588-4651 or visit www.apl.com/Guam for more details.
Ever notice how that one perfect holiday gift is just out of reach? Or how sales on the stuff you want all come at the same time? This season, plan ahead with a holiday loan from First Hawaiian Bank. Now you can afford to be nice without being naughty. For more details, visit FHB.com or any branch to apply. Additional restrictions apply. First Hawaiian Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Every Tuesday at all KFC locations, the deal goes down. 20 pieces of wings for just $15.
Okay, so here we are. Call to the post, Churchill Downs, Louisville, Kentucky. The home stretch. I got about 8 more minutes to cough my way through Tall Tales here, and I'll be able to go home and do my coughing at home, which I'm sure would be an improvement. I got a couple of good questions here on Facebook. Or comments. One says there are more Chamorros in San Diego than there are on Guam. So, that's another dimension here. If we're talking about Chamorro self-determination, shouldn't we extend that opportunity to Chamorros no matter where they live geographically? Because the basic rap of the Chamorro nationalist is a Chamorro is a Chamorro. And then here's the other one. Bob, why are those senators not consulting with legal counsel on the bills they intend to submit? And I can give you a little historical background on that. Back in the 13th Guam legislature, I was assistant legislative counsel. 14th and 15th, I was legislative counsel. And back in those days, legislative counsel drafted almost all the bills for Democrats and Republicans. But there was a real practical reason that council drafted almost all the bills, and that was that back in those days, the legal office had some machines called mag card typewriters. So a mag card typewriter was a typewriter that made some electronic impressions on a plastic medium. It wasn't anything at all like a word processing program now, but you could have pre-set up mag cards, so you wouldn't have to do the numbers down the sides and all the rest of that stuff. So council did most of the drafting back in those days, and of course, legislature had to hire counsel, had to pay them. But then when word processing came along, you didn't have to hire a lawyer to do that because you could hire, probably hire somebody who's only been out of high school a couple years who really was good at Microsoft Word, and he could take a piece of paper and he could put something on that piece of paper that had an all-caps centered title. It had numbers down the sides. It just, looked just as good as the stuff that council used to draft, and it cost so much less. So what's the problem? So now I know we have people in the legislature who are not lawyers who are drafting bills. I have known a couple people in my long, long life that weren't lawyers that could draft bills, could draft simple bills, but very few. And the average lawyer, unless he's had some experience with it, probably is not going to be a very good bill drafter either. So I don't know how the Legislative Counsel's office functions nowadays. Believe it or not, I'm not on their Christmas card list. But if I were Legislative Counsel, I would be embarrassed by this bill that the Three Musketeers put out with its, extreme violations of the germaneness section of the standing rules. If this will be caught at the time that the bill goes to second reading, I don't know. I might even go down and testify on the bill if, of course, if I say that for sure, they'll hold the public hearing at 4. Yeah, we'll show, Bob. We'll have a public hearing at 4. We don't need no stinking talk show host down here. So that's about what I got to say on that. Let me see what else I got here. I guess the Tall Tales gang favors term limits. Sherry Iriarte says, I hope you feel better soon. Well, thank you very much, Sherry. I do too. Yeah. Okay, so where was I here? Item number 7. Guam should be decolonized. And I kind of got into that with the other one, but decolonized. The fundamental form of decolonization would be independence. And you know that I am not at all in favor of independence. I think that we are part of the greatest empire that the world has ever seen. It's really to all of our advantages to remain as a part of the empire. We ought to spend some of our efforts attempting to improve our situation in the empire instead of kvetching about it. The other alternative is statehood. And the chances of Guam becoming a state are not even slim and none. We don't have enough people. The average number of the smallest states, Wyoming, is close to 700,000 people. So none of these states is going to be too excited about admitting a new state where 160,000 people have the same representation in Congress as they do. Second thing is that new states have traditionally been admitted in pairs to keep the political balance. Right now, Puerto Rico would make a fine candidate for statehood. It would be entitled to 4 members of the House of Representatives and 2 senators. But of course, the Republicans are not going to be too crazy about Puerto Rico because that's just more Democrats in the House. There are too many there already. So the chances of Guam ever becoming a state, unlikely. Now, the term free association is kicked around, and some people, well, yeah, free association would be the best thing because, we could still get some of the federal programs, and we could charge the feds rent on Anderson and Naval Station, and it would really be the best thing, best deal of all. Not so. So maybe I'll pick up on some of these things tomorrow, depending on what the news brings forward for my card. So it's really great to be back home, even though I brought this cough back with me. I'll see you all tomorrow.